There is a grain that can survive without irrigation in regions where rainfall drops below 10 inches a year. It grows in soil so poor that wheat would fail to germinate. It requires no synthetic fertilizer. It can be stored in a simple clay vessel or a sealed container for 10, 20, even 30 years without significant nutrient loss or spoilage. Armies marched on it across 3 continents for over 3,000 years. Empires stored it in granaries as famine insurance, knowing it would still be viable long after the rulers who stockpiled it were dead. And then, within a single human lifetime, most of the world stopped growing it. Not because it failed, not because something better was discovered. It was replaced for reasons that had almost nothing to do with nutrition, resilience, or common sense. The grain is millet. And the story of how it was pushed to the margins of human agriculture is one of the most economically revealing episodes in modern food history. Millet is not one plant. It is a family of related cereal grains, the most important being pearl millet, foxtail millet, finger millet, and proso millet. Together, they represent one of the oldest cultivated food groups on Earth. Foxtail millet was domesticated in northern China roughly 8,000 years ago. Pearl millet was independently domesticated in West Africa around 5,000 years ago. Finger millet was cultivated across East Africa and the Indian subcontinent for at least 4,000 years. These were not minor regional curiosities. For most of recorded civilization, millet was the dominant grain across vast stretches of Asia and Africa. In ancient China, millet was the foundational crop. It preceded rice as the primary staple in the north. The earliest Chinese agricultural texts reference millet cultivation as the basis of social order. In India, millets were so central to rural life that they were woven into religious ceremonies, seasonal festivals, and daily household identity. In Africa, pearl millet sustained communities across the Sahel, one of the harshest agricultural zones on the planet, where almost nothing else could reliably produce a harvest. The military history alone should have guaranteed millet a permanent place in the global food system. Roman legions carried millet as a campaign grain because it was light, calorie-dense, and nearly indestructible in storage. Mongol armies moved across Central Asia with millet as a primary ration. Across sub-Saharan Africa, standing armies and trade caravans relied on millet cakes and millet porridge as their core fuel. The reason was always the same. Millet stores almost indefinitely in dry conditions. It does not require the careful moisture control that wheat demands. It does not attract the same insect pressure as rice. A sack of millet sealed in a dry environment can remain edible and nutritionally intact for decades. In a world without refrigeration, without vacuum sealing, without industrial food processing, this was not a minor advantage. It was the single most important characteristic a grain could possess. Shelf life was survival. And the agricultural profile was just as remarkable. Millet matures fast, often in 60 to 90 days. It grows in heat that would destroy wheat and barley. It tolerates sandy, nutrient-depleted soils. It requires a fraction of the water that rice demands. In many traditional systems, millet was grown without any added fertilizer at all, because the plant evolved in low-nutrient environments and adapted to extract what it needed from soils that would be considered useless by modern commercial farming standards. For a small household or a subsistence community, millet was as close to a self-sustaining grain as nature has ever produced. You could grow it on marginal land, harvest it quickly, store it almost forever, and feed a family through conditions that would bankrupt a modern wheat operation. So, what happened? The answer is not a single event. It is a pattern, and the pattern has a clear economic logic. The displacement of millet began in earnest during the colonial period and accelerated dramatically in the 20th century. When European colonial administrations took control of agricultural policy in Africa and South Asia, They prioritized crops that could be exported, taxed, and integrated into global commodity markets. Wheat and rice fit those systems. Millet did not. Millet was grown by small households on small plots for local consumption. It did not move efficiently through centralized supply chains. It was not traded on international commodity exchanges. It generated no export revenue for colonial governments. So, colonial agricultural policy actively discouraged millet cultivation and incentivized wheat and rice, not because those crops were better for the people growing them, but because they were better for the economic structure governing them. This pattern did not end with colonialism. It deepened. The Green Revolution of the 1960s and 70s is widely celebrated as a triumph of agricultural science, and in many ways it was. New high-yield varieties of wheat and rice, combined with synthetic fertilizers and controlled irrigation, dramatically increased calorie output in parts of Asia and Latin America. But the Green Revolution was not designed for all crops equally. Research funding, government subsidies, and institutional support were overwhelmingly directed toward wheat and rice. Millet received almost nothing. No significant breeding programs, no subsidized seed development, no government price supports. The result was predictable. Farmers who adopted Green Revolution wheat varieties received financial incentives, access to credit, and guaranteed purchase prices. Farmers who continued growing millet received none of those things. Within a single generation, millions of small farmers across India and Africa shifted away from millet, not because millet had failed them, but because the economic system surrounding them made it financially irrational to keep growing it. Behind that system were specific corporate interests. The Green Revolution wheat and rice varieties required synthetic fertilizer to achieve their promised yields. They required purchased seed, often annually, because many high-yield varieties did not breed true or were designed as hybrids that needed to be repurchased each season. They required pesticides and herbicides. Every input was a product. Every product was a revenue stream. Millet, by contrast, needed almost none of these inputs. A farmer growing millet on dry land without fertilizer was a farmer who bought almost nothing from the agrochemical industry. From the perspective of seed companies, fertilizer manufacturers, and pesticide producers, millet was a dead end, not because it was unproductive, because it was unprofitable for everyone except the person growing it. The consequences of this shift are now measurable. In India, where millets were once the primary grain across most of the country, per capita millet consumption dropped by more than 80% between 1960 and 2020. In the same period, rates of type 2 diabetes in India exploded. Nutritional researchers have drawn direct connections between the decline of millet consumption and the rise of metabolic disease, because millets have a significantly lower glycemic index than white rice or refined wheat. They release energy slowly. They do not cause the same insulin spikes. For thousands of years, populations that ate millet as a staple had almost no incidence of diet-related metabolic disease. Within 2 generations of switching to wheat and polished rice, those same populations developed some of the highest diabetes rates in the world. In Africa, the displacement of millet has produced a different but equally serious problem. Millet was the crop that made agriculture viable in arid and semi-arid zones. As millet cultivation declined and wheat and maize were promoted as replacements, food production in marginal regions became dependent on rainfall levels and fertilizer inputs that those regions could not reliably sustain. The result has been increased food insecurity in precisely the areas where millet had provided stable harvests for millennia. The crop that was evolved to thrive in scarcity was replaced by crops that require abundance, and when that abundance falters, entire regions face crisis. What makes this relevant to an American household right now is not abstract. Fertilizer prices have become volatile globally. Water availability is a growing constraint across the western and southern United States. Wheat prices are subject to international supply shocks that no individual family can predict or control, and the cost of the average grocery basket continues to climb in ways that outpace reported inflation. In that environment, a grain that grows in poor soil, needs no fertilizer, requires minimal water, matures in under 90 days, and stores for decades is not a historical curiosity. It is a strategic asset. Millet can be grown in a backyard garden in most of the continental United States. It doesn't require special equipment. It does not require purchased fertilizer. It can be harvested by hand, dried in open air, and stored in glass jars or sealed buckets for years. It can be cooked as a porridge, ground into flour for flatbreads, toasted as a pilaf, or fermented into traditional beverages. Its nutritional profile includes high levels of magnesium, phosphorus, B vitamins, and plant-based iron. It is naturally gluten-free. It is one of the most complete and low-maintenance grains a household can produce independently. In 2023, the United Nations declared the International Year of Millets. It was a quiet acknowledgement, largely ignored by Western media, that the global food system had made a serious miscalculation. The institution responsible for coordinating international food policy was publicly recognizing that one of the most resilient and nutritious grain families in human history had been systematically sidelined, and that reversing that mistake was now a matter of global food security. The fact that this declaration received almost no coverage in the American press tells you something. Not about the importance of millet, about the priorities of the system that replaced it. 3,000 years of proven performance, exposed to the most extreme climates on Earth, and thrived. Fed more human beings across more centuries than quinoa, oats, and barley combined. Exposed to the modern industrial agriculture machine, and it was not outcompeted. It was defunded. It was not replaced because it failed. It was replaced because it could not be monetized at every stage of the process. A grain that needs nothing is a grain that generates no recurring revenue. And in a system that runs on inputs, a crop that doesn't need inputs is not an asset. It is a threat to the model. Your great-grandmother, or her grandmother before her, may well have known what millet was. If your family has roots in the rural South, in Appalachia, in the Great Plains, or in almost any agricultural community outside of Western Europe, there is a reasonable chance that millet was part of your family's food history at some point in the last few centuries. It was grown in early America. It was fed to families and livestock alike. It was simple, it was free, and it worked. The fact that you probably cannot buy it in your nearest grocery store today is not a reflection of its value. It is a reflection of a system that only promotes what it can sell you again and again. The grain is still here. The seed is still available. The soil in your yard can almost certainly grow it. The only thing that disappeared was the knowledge. And knowledge, unlike a corporate supply chain, can be rebuilt without anyone's permission.